Hi, Angela. Just waiting on a few more people to join. Hi, Fiona. Petra, welcome to the webinar today. Megan, we've got heaps of people joining. Awesome. We'll give it a couple more minutes as people are still loading in. Hope everyone had a good weekend and a good start to their week yesterday. On my side, there is myself, Scott Campbell, and my colleague, Andy Drinkwater. If you guys have any questions, just drop it in the chat, but we'll be starting in a minute. I just wanted to confirm, can someone just say in the chat, just say hi and confirm that you guys can hear me clearly and that you can see my screen. Awesome, a few people responding there. Thanks, guys. All right, we'll get started. So today's session's on how to build an annual plan and figure. We'll cover off a few housekeeping items first. So if you have any apps running on your computer, please take this time to go and close them just to ensure that you guys have the best streaming quality today. If you do lose me at any point, just look for this little blue icon somewhere at the bottom of your screen. Click on it. That should reopen the webinar. And you will be able to see me again, hopefully. If you have any questions, I mentioned before, a few of you may have heard me that I got my colleague Andy in the chat there. So if you have any burning questions, ask and he'll endeavor to answer them as we go through. If not, I'll try and cover it off at the end. This is a pretty packed webinar today in terms of content. So if I do fail, please feel free to email me at scott@figure.com and I'll try and follow up over the course of the day. If you need help at any time in Figure, especially if you're new and you're not too familiar with our app, we have this really awesome little green bubble in the bottom right-hand corner. My rule of thumb is if you take more than 2 minutes to find that in our YouTube page or our help set articles on the bottom left-hand corner, takes you more than 2 minutes, drop us a line in the chat. We have an awesome team sitting behind that green bubble, always willing to lend a hand. Just let us know what you're trying to do. Let us know that we can have a look at your screen that you're working on, and we'll get in touch. If you want to have a look at our YouTube page, we have some awesome videos. This actual webinar will be recorded and put there. So if you want to come back and have a look at it, you can. Awesome way to sort of self-pace your learning when you're sort of watching a tutorial on one screen and then completing those tasks on the actual file that you're working on. We have a lot of awesome case studies from people in our farming team, from bankers, farmers, accountants. Just need to go to our website down the bottom there, /blog/planning for the future. And you should have articles there that you can read that'll give you a good sense of how people are using apps like Figured in Zero to help their businesses. So really recommend having a few reads. So what's on today? Today, we're going to have a quick look at the end result first. I think that's probably a nice way to start off this session, is to look at where we're heading to. We're going to build out a cash flow forecast, and then I'll tell you where to find it, why we're doing it, how it's structured. That'll sort of set the scene for the work that we're about to do. Then I'll cover off snapshots and rolling plan. These are key concepts to Figured around how we handle our data. So if you're accountants on the call today that don't have all your clients on our latest and greatest version, please let us know. We'd love to get you all converted across. I know that most people, 90%, have all or most of their farms already converted, but getting on to rolling plan just means that you get the latest features. You can take as many snapshots as you'd like. But we're going to cover off what data you have to work with, what is actual rolling plan, what is it about, how to approve your plan, and how snapshots work in reporting. So we'll have a look at a few of those things. And then we'll get into the nitty gritty. We'll build out a plan. We'll start off in your trackers. I'll tell you a little bit about what your trackers are, where you can find them, why we do trackers first. I'll try to cover that off when we're looking at our reports. And then we'll get into building everything in the planning grid. So the planning grid is for all your non-tracker items. We'll talk about the options that we have available to us. And then we'll finish off the day with looking at a couple of other reports outside the variance, outside the cash flow report that you can run. So let's take a look at the cash flow report. I'll show you just the standard cash flow report and then all the different options you can run. So under reports, on the nav bar on the left-hand side, a little tip here. You can collapse that to give you a bit more real estate for viewing. Awesome to do when you have the team and clients in a room and you're not really focusing on stuff on the left, or you know these off by heart. I don't really need to have the nav bar open anymore, just to have maximum space on my screen for the information I'm looking at. So you can expand and collapse that nav bar is one of my tips. And then you can click on the cash flow report there. I've already opened up a few of these. What I wanted to show you was the date selector up the top. This is something I'll probably come back to as we go through this, but this is so important. This controls the split of information that we're looking at between actuals and your forecast, or actuals and your plan. Use those words interchangeably here. You can see over here, I'm just looking at my pure forecast for 2022. If I jump back, I got my actuals set to last month. So in 2021, I got my split here of actuals up until April and my forecast going forward. So this is your basic cash flow report. Figured has its own reporting categories, separate to zeros. We will group all of these together automatically for new files. We actually got some AI that goes and looks at the descriptions used nationally, and then automatically categorizes those accounts from zero against our groupings here to give it the structure that you see today. So this is just your basic cash flow report. How it differs from the cash summary in zero is that we have our actuals and then our forecast going forward, which is what this session's all about. It's not just having a look at actuals, but looking at your plan going forward so that you can see where your business is heading. But under additional options, we have, and in any of your reports, have a look at additional options. We have things that allow you to customize your reports even further. So I've gone and done this in a few of my other tabs. So under period, you got the custom option. You can run quarterly reports. You got this monthly option, which is what we're looking at here. But in this next report, I've ticked show quantities. So then you can actually see, I'll tick show quantities here and run it again. So ticking show quantities will actually allow you to see the quantities below the income and the expenses for your trackers, which I think is awesome, because then you can make more sense of the numbers that you're looking at. It's not just the dollar values that have been entered there. So if I go and expand out my Fonterra information here, you can see the quantities are showing below. So not just the dollar values, the quantities are also showing, and I can talk to those a lot better. So that's one thing you can do under additional options. Because Figured's home for planning, home for quantities, whether it's your livestock, your milk, all of that can be bought into your reports. So, the other thing that you can do is you can go into additional options. And so I'll do that again over here, additional options, and you can compare information as well. So you can compare to a snapshot. So looking at this, you might want to compare to a snapshot that you made originally at the beginning of the year, you can select that and run that report. So I got that here already saved. So just to show you here, this is the comparison that is always below. You can see it might be a timing variance. We plan for that income to come in November, but it came in December. You can annotate that report when you've saved the report, and when you go to print it, that annotation will be in that PDF copy. I'll just open one of those up now. So you can see that annotation in there and the commentary down below. So yeah, under additional options, you can click on that comparison to snapshots and select the snapshot that you want to compare to. Normally that'll be your original plan, especially if you're working in with the bankers when they approve lending. It's really about how you're going compared to the original plan that you had. So you can bring that original plan into the cash flow report. That's something you can't easily do in Xero, especially with quantities. Now you can annotate it and you can see what it looks like over here. The other option under additional options is to sort of flip to that annual mode. So you can see here that I got my forecast for 2022 and my actuals plus forecast for this year. If you have 5 years worth of data, I know people love showing all 5 side by side to give you an idea of how you're trending. So sort of a trend analysis report. You can look at the numbers and see how you're going across your gross profit for dairy cattle or Fonterra income, or just looking at your operating surplus and see how that's changing year on year. How I shared that cash flow report, and then you can do this for any of ours, is clicking on share report, clicking on that green button, clicking on save report. You can copy the clipboard, paste it into Excel if you want to do things in any other app outside of Figured. But when you've actually gone in, you can actually save this report by clicking that share button. Give it a specific title and give it any notes you want to give it. So you can select any cell that you're looking at here, whether it's the columns or one of the accounts. You can give it a note. And then when you go and share that, you can either look at the PDF by clicking on actions, or you can click share and email just that this report to one person. So if I go to email this to, say, Andy, who might not have access to this file, it'll send him just a soft copy of this report with the notes. So I'm just going to say, please review before our next meeting. Send yourself a copy and that'll email that straight to Andy. If they do have access, that'll give them a link to jump straight into the app, have a look at this report, and then they can look around at anything else they want to have a look at. If you want them to be able to add notes themselves, the minimum access to add notes is that can view access. So that's another tip. So this is what we're trying to head to today, is build out a plan in one of our years so that we can run our reports and have a look at our actuals plus forecast in the year that we're working in. Have our forecast extending out into the next year. And then we are able to run not just the cash flow report, but reports like the variance report and the production report, which we'll have a look at the end. But I thought just to sort of set the scene, I'd run and show you guys real quickly just a few versions of the cash flow report that you can pull out of Figured that I know our users value and use regularly with the wider farming team. So hopefully that was useful for new and existing people on today's webinar. We're going to jump into the next part, which was talking about snapshots and rolling plan and what data we have to work with. So you can use Xero Ledger all the way through to Xero Business Edition. Obviously, Ledger's only got annual data, but there's ways we can sort of cut it to have a cash flow view, especially, or cash flowed view, especially if you have a standardized chart of accounts. But that monthly data is probably where the real value is at, especially after a client's been on Figured for a year. So let's just have a look. Zero ledger, you'd have actuals coming through, probably summarized at the end. We do work with it. My little sort of workaround at the moment that I'm trying with a few firms is if we have a standardized chart of accounts and we can export out, say, one of our farms that we're using, the data that we have, either snapshot or actuals, and import that in, or maybe give it a value for an account, say fertilizer, for example. If we get everything in here based on 100, spread everything sort of how things would transpose in that actual farm or transpire for an actual farm in the prior year, giving it a weighting in the months that we want to sort of have a reasonable curve. We'll import that into the new file that we have for a new client. So not using the actual data, but using sort of a weighted sort of curve based off an actual client that has the same chart. That can be used to cash flow this ledger. So just wanted to put that out as an idea for new clients that don't have data, or a client with zero ledger. There's probably ways we can do things to cash flow their annualized information. But here's monthly data coming through from zero on any of these versions of zero here. We can leverage this data to build out a plan quite quickly. So we'll take a look at that when we get into it. So zero cash book, GST, zero business edition. If you have files like those, you can, with historical data, you can get into building out a plan today quite quickly. So the rolling plan, this concept in the latest version of Figured, which has been out for a while now that most people are on, allows information to roll from one year to the next. So any planned information that you have in the current season that has a cash impact in the next season, that will automatically flow through. So if anyone on the call, existing clients, is on the old version, please get over to the new version. There's a whole bunch of other tools that I won't cover off in great detail today that is on the new version that you can't access on the old. So this idea of rolling plan just means that you can make a plan as short or as long as you want. We have this idea of snapshots where the first snapshot is your annual plan. So a snapshot is just a capture of the data that you're looking at. So if I choose a split in my global date selector that I talked about before at the top of the screen, actuals to last month, and then forecast going forward, if I take a snapshot, it'll capture that exact split of information. If I go actuals to none, I'm just going to be capturing my forecasted data. So just a little bit more on zero and Figured, so more for new people to Figured on the call. All the actuals come from zero, opening balances, your chart of accounts, your contacts. So in Figured, all you need to do is set your actuals to date. By default, the actuals is to last month, but you can change that and select where you want your horizon line to be, your actuals horizon line to be, and where you want your forecast to move forward. So zero is our source of truth. If there's anything that you see in Figured that doesn't seem right, so in that unlikely event where you do see something, I'd normally say it's on the zero side. So if you see anything to do with actuals, have a look at zero. 99% of the time, you'll notice that if it's that way in Figured, it's that way in zero. If you go and check zero and zero is different to Figured, drop us a line. We'll tell you why. We'll look into it for you. So Figured on our side, we're home to production. We always contain that forecasted, that planned information. And then we combine the two to give you those views that I was showing you in the cash flow report before. And that's how we can sort of make sense of not where we've been, but where we're heading. And we can use the tools that we'll look at next to reforecast and also build out our plans sort of going forward into the future. So approving your plan, so just click in the new season, you'll see an approved plan button on the top right-hand corner. You can also, after doing that, you'll notice the wording changes. The wording changes to take snapshot. So don't fret if you do see it change. You can always move that annual plan label from the first snapshot data capture onto any other snapshot that you do later. So just an example, I take snapshot, I realize, man, I didn't do depreciation or some other accounts that were sort of important, underestimated some stuff, want to go and redo those. You can do that. Once you've done that, come back and take another snapshot, add your name and description to the new one, and you can move that annual plan label on to the next snapshot. So hopefully that makes sense. If it doesn't, it'll make more when we jump into the app. And then you can run your reports and you can compare them to those snapshots. We had a little look at that when we looked at the cash flow report before. You can go under comparison, hit the drop down, compare to snapshots and select it. So I might do that again at the end. And you can take as many snapshots as you want. So one thing I really like about snapshots, and I know other users do as well, is that before you'd have to, without snapshots, you'd have to go into our reporting area. And for each report that you wanted, you'd have to go and save it. That'll be saving that one report for that point in time. So if you need to save 6 reports at that point in time, you have to go into each report, click save and share, save that one report, and do that to the others. With snapshots, you save one snapshot and you'll have all that data available in all your reports. So anytime you make any material changes, don't be scared to go and save snapshots, and you'll have those available across all your reports. You don't have to save each. The only time you go and save it again is where you're wanting to annotate and show one snapshot against your live actuals and live plan. You might want to save that individual report again, but you're never going to lose all that data that you've updated at that point in time. So hopefully that makes sense. We'll jump ahead now. Snapshots in reporting. So you can run any snapshot instead of actuals, or you can, like I said before, you can compare those snapshots with your actuals and forecasts. And important to note that snapshots aren't easily editable. We do have the ability now to go and re-import from a snapshot for all your non-tracker items. So if you do realize you went ahead of, say, the preceding 2 days and you made some changes, but you're like, it's just mucking around, those don't make any sense, I want to go back to that base plan that I had, you can go back and import your non-tracker information from a particular snapshot. Or if you want to do some sort of detailed what-if analysis, you can muck around with your live plan after taking a snapshot of it. So take a snapshot of your live plan, make some changes, have a look at that in your reports, and then you might want to go back to that live plan where you were at before. You can then go to that snapshot of that live plan that you had at the beginning of the day and click to re-import that live plan in. But generally, snapshots are just read-only. In your reporting, you can't edit them, you're just viewing them. But we do have a neat import feature, which you'll see. But just be careful when you're using it. Don't forget to save the information. If not, you might override information that you wanted to roll back to. So let's get into building a plan. There's a 3-step process. If you were at our webinar last week, Tuesday, on the end of year process, tend to have everything in sort of 3 easy steps, easy to remember. Step 1 is to enter your plan, choose last year's actuals or plan, or you can enter them manually, especially if you don't have anything to reference. Or I got that new workaround that I'm trying out with a few firms where you can use an actual farm if you have a standardized chart of accounts, sort of weight the information, spread that out using 100 and spreading it to the different months to represent how you want it all weighted. Import that in, and you can use that on any new client. So it's probably an activity that firms are going to do once, build out with a standardized chart of accounts and import for all these accounts with your weightings in different months, basing that on an actual farm that does a pretty good job. And then you can use that as a sort of starting point. Hopefully that makes sense. If it doesn't, drop me a line if you're interested and we can talk it through over the phone. Just email me at scott@figure.com. So you can use the copying and spreading tool. It's probably the neatest way to build out your plan quite quickly. Now, if you haven't seen our curve tool, we'll take a look at it. I think that adds a lot of value to the work that our farmers, accountants, and bankers are doing in the app. We'll take a snapshot, we'll look at reporting, and that should be bringing us to the close of today's session. So let's jump into that live example. So I'm in the planning grid here, and when we were looking at our cash flow report, I should have mentioned that one of the things that I wanted to call out is the structure, is that anything to do with our trackers under operations trackers is at the top of any of our reports. That makes it a really good place to start our planning, as that'll give us our gross profit from our trackers and should help us then look at our income, other income and expenses down the bottom, especially our expenses, a lot more carefully to see how we can smooth out the lumpiness of our sort of cash flow here. So if we had any month that we sort of under or low, we could then start looking at the expenses. But up the top is where all our trackers sit. So that's where we should start our planning. That's where we'll start our planning today. So on the trackers, we'll go there, and then we'll jump back to finish our plan in the planning grid. I'm going to do this for 2023 just because I finished my planning for 2022. So I'll just jump ahead. So there's no reason why you can't finish a plan in 2022 and then start planning ahead. There's no data in here. So what I'm going to do now is start building that out. So on the left-hand side in your nav bar, click on trackers. And inside your trackers, we'll start off with livestock, and then we'll go to milk. So if we go into here, you can see that there's information rolling over from the prior year, but we don't have much information in the current year that we're in. The easiest way to go about this is if we hit this, we can have a look at information that we have in any of the years. So I'll go back to 2021 just to look at actuals. So we got actual information here, and if we had forecasted information in 21, we'd have that flowing through. What I want to do now to quickly build out a plan is export out my actuals. So I'll go 2021 actuals, file format, leave those as it is. You can email yourself a copy and you can download that. Then what you want to do is come back into here. You don't have to go into 2023 or the 2022, the year that you're building out, to import it in, but that'll give us our starting point. So I can go into tools and then go into import. I can then click on forecast and then choose that file that I downloaded. So if I go there, it should be at the top, open, and then click on import. So it'll let you know that the file that you're importing has a different name and is looking at actuals instead of forecast. That's actually a good sign. I did want to import my actuals from a prior year as my starting point in the future year that I'm planning out. Figured we'll go through, adjust the dates, it'll skip lines that aren't relevant, like the header, etc. Could review that information and then click done. Once that's done, the main things I want to see in here, I'll just go back to the 2022 year. So my demo farm's playing funny, but over here, you'd want to see the main things you want to see in here is your sale and purchases being imported. It'll bring in all other movements as well when you do that import. But that'd be the start of your plan in one of those future years. You can then go and start editing that info. So quickest way to start building out that plan, export out the information, import it in using the tools drop-down menu. And then you can click on the item you want to edit and select the quantity field if you're wanting to adjust that, or the amount field. I'll just do the amount here. I'll leave the quantities the same, and then tick that box. So I'm editing my purchases here. So the idea is to get my purchases and stuff updated for the new year, get my sales updated as well. Quantity, you can adjust that. You can change the amount. You can work on live or carcass weight, and you can change your metric from total to per kg or per head. When you're happy with that, again, if you make a change, so I'm just going to change this bit over here. Tick that box and that'll save it. So it's easy as that when you're exporting and importing and then adjusting dollar values to build out that cash flow plan. Or you could just start from scratch. Don't even import. Sit down with your client. Say, hey, here's your stock rec. Without looking at last year, what are you planning on doing in this space for sales and purchases? You don't have to build out a full stock rec if your goal is to just get that cash flow out, but I'd encourage you to try and build out a detailed plan when you have some time, because then you can run more detailed reporting later on. I'll show you that when we have a look at the production report. So that's step one. I'll quickly just have a look at milk. I know that some people don't have any dairy clients, so just bear with me. This will only take a minute. Over here, you can see that it's just as simple as punching in your kgs and milk solids. What I'd recommend is opening up your milk tracker for the prior year on a separate screen or a separate tab. And then you can copy and paste or reference and key in those dollar values and quantities. So if I go back to the 2021 year, you'll see that I got all my information flowing through. I can simply copy that and then paste that in to the different months I have there, or type that in. The milk price, you can override those. So if Fonterra hasn't put out the forecasted milk price, you can punch your own values in, and when you click save, Figured will calculate your income. Under tracker settings, if you were at our end of year training, having that set up correctly will allow you to also automatically calculate your share milker, contract milker portions that you need to pay out. So those expenses being mapped for a farm owner would automatically be calculated based off the share milker percentage or the kg of milk solids, the dollars that they get per kg of milk solids for a contract milker. So those are things that save you some time. You don't have to enter those bits of information. Also, the dairy NZ levy and M-bovis levy is being calculated under that space. Map your dairy NZ levy account there, expense account, and Figured will calculate those things for you. If you're with Fonterra, please set up your feeds. Those actual kgs of milk solids will drop in. And for any of our milk companies, we update the milk price. Click on the reset to the latest milk prices, and those will drop in as well. So before I move off this, put your peak cows in, put your milking platform in. Those will feed through to your production reports, so you can have a look at that sort of KPI reporting where you have $1 per kg of milk solid, or $1 per peak cow, or $1 per effective area. So that's step one, and that'll be bringing us to the top of our report, where we have, I'll use 2022 as my example. So that'll cover off all of this information that we're looking at here up the top, where our milk information will all be done. The other thing is the retros automatically get calculated and they'll flow through. And all our livestock information that we exported from the prior year's actuals and imported in will already be here. And you can see how easy it is to go and edit those bits of information back into your trackers. And then it's about building out the rest of this plan. And the easiest way to do that is to go to your planning grid. So in the nav bar, planning drop down, hit on the planning grid. That'll bring you to this window. And then under tools, you have the ability to click on import. And the import allows you to import from last year's actuals, or you can import from a prior year's snapshot, or from a file. For those ledgers or those clients that don't have comparative data, and you heard me talking about a standardized chart of accounts, how useful that can be. if you have a standardized chart and you have clients that have cash flowed items here, we can weight that, import that into a new client, and use that as our distribution curve. So import that into the prior year and use that as our distribution curve in the current year. But for anyone that has historical data, monthly historical data for existing clients, we can leverage all of that information by simply copying the actuals from last year and clicking on import. I've already done this just to save us a few seconds. You don't want to watch a loading screen. That'll bring all of this information in here for you. Little tips up the top is that you can collapse everything down if you're just wanting to have a quick look at how things are impacting on your bottom line. You can then expand out relevant sections you want to do some work in, and you can start working in them. You can simply edit information like so. So you can say you want to increase this to 600, just type that in. So that's just working in the summary view for that account for that month. So that's one way. The other way you can edit information is by using some of the tools that we have down the bottom here. So very rarely would you want to ever go and do a flat spread. So you might copy that amount and spread that across. Or you might want to, what I'd recommend is actually spreading. If I go 16, I'd go spread that 16,000 based off a curve. And that curve could be your last year's actuals. And then spread that across. So you'll see that it'll split that amount based on your spend last year. And that happened in those 2 months. So you can just go down all the accounts. You can reference what's on that side. If you want to type in an annualized amount, so you can add that into the first cell, click spread, and then spread that. You can do monthly, bi-monthly, or quarterly. I won't do them. You sort of get the idea that it'll sort of split things equally amongst the different months, or every second month, or every fourth month. Or you can go in and select monthly, select curve and base that on last year's actuals. That's probably the most commonly used thing now. Just adds a bit of sense to the spreading based on how things happened last year, opposed to doing these flat spreads or copying information across. You can adjust by a percentage as well. That's just going to compound adjust. So I don't think that that percentage spread is particularly useful. But if you do want to compound spread something across, that's how you can do it. We're looking at ways to sort of change this up where the spread by percentage will increase the amounts that are already existing. So that'll come out in a future update. Right now, if you did want to do a percentage spread, I'd export out the file, use Excel to do that, and then import it back in. The other way you can do things, a little tip here, expand everything out. Look for, say, fertilizer, go down to that. You might want to work in a lot more detail opposed to this monthly view where you can just punch in an amount. What you might want to do is not edit the original figures that are here. What you might want to do is go to your account schedule. This is a detailed planning window where you can build out your budget assumptions in more detail. So over here, what you can do is click on add forecast transaction, add your invoice date. Your cash date will automatically come in based on the payment periods that you have under settings. So we cover that off in more detailed sessions when we work with practices, how to set up the file properly, how that impacts on your profit and cash view so that you get that nice three-way budgeting and forecasting going on in Figured. I say this tool here is the equivalent of Xero's journaling tool. You can pretty much do whatever you need to do to get the plan to be as accurate as possible. So one use case is with fertilizer. You might have deferred expense payments where all of the invoices are on the 5th of August, but you're entering the cash date in different months. So you might want to put your quantity, your amount, and you can even put a rate, and then save and add another. And again, you can enter the same invoice date, charge ahead. You might have another payment going out. Put your cost quantity rate in. You can put some notes in here. So it might be based on the number of cattle that you have, that you're doing a purchase of X amount of this product or that product. Put those notes in there, save and add another. So you're building out multiple line items. This isn't going to replace, this is going to add to the information that you have in your planning grid. So in that summary view, it'll collate it all together in the relevant months. But when you jump down into this view, you can see the additional transactions. You're not replacing the original planned information that the client made or put in, but you're adding to it, and you can dive down in here, look at the notes and talk to that information. So hopefully that's useful. Jumping back to the main planning grid. Control R or F5, little shortcuts to refresh the page that you're on. So just to summarize everything that we've done, our plan is, pretty much built out for the 2022 year. Trackers, I exported and imported information for my livestock. I then simply clicked on the movements, sales, and purchases that I wanted to edit. In the planning grid, I copied last year's actuals or last year's plan using the import feature. Selecting that will automatically bring in all the information. Cash flow ready to go. And then I started editing information either in the cell or using some of the tools that we have down the bottom, particularly that curve tool that shows up when it has information to reference in the prior year. So you'll notice if it doesn't have something, it won't show the curve option, but when it does, click on spread, click on the amount that you want to spread, that curve option shows up there. So if you don't see that, click on spread, click on that cell, and you have your annualized amount put in there. The curve option should be there if it has something to reference from last year. Or you don't have to reference last year's actuals. You can reference any snapshot that you have available. So some other use cases where you might say, hey, I want to use last year's actuals, but I know this year is probably going to be more similar to the 2017 year. You can use 2017's actuals or 2017's base plan. Once you're happy with everything that you've done here, all you need to do is click on Take Snapshot, or if it's the first plan you're doing, it has the annual plan button. Type in the name. So base plan 2022, give it a description, draft to share with bank, set as annual plan. So if you had already set your annual plan and you've made changes and you want this to be the annual plan, you want to move the annual plan label to this, you can do that by ticking that box and take that snapshot. So that's the first snapshot you take. That all gets stored under the planning area, under snapshots here. So I'll just go into that area so you can see. This is just a virtual cabinet, basically filing all that information. You can't drill down into it. It's just showing you all the snapshots that you have. You can then move that annual plan label to the plan that you want. You can even archive, or you can edit the name and description here. But that's taking that snapshot that we took before is saving all that data so I can bring that into my reporting. Highly recommend doing that when you make any material changes. But it's as easy as that. Start off with your trackers. Use the tools that we have in the planning grid, whether that's the account schedule for more detailed planning, the curve tool for spreading things out in a smarter way, or just overriding things in the planning grid itself. And then take that snapshot. Those are all here. And when we jump back into our reporting, all of that information will be available to us regardless of what report you're in. Under additional options, you can pull up all those snapshots that you have anywhere you see that under additional options. So just looking at a couple other reports that you can run in here before we finish up is you got your variance report. I know that that's a key one. The bankers, if you're dealing with them, are always wanting to have a look at your actuals versus your original snapshot. So that original plan, that base plan. So that's how I'd bring it up for year to date and also for the month. If you're working with your team, you'd probably want to be working in your forecast. And that's your live plan, your latest plan that you're working in, and you're wanting to make sure that you're moving around or talking to any timing variances, looking at those overs and unders for income and expenses, reforecasting each month, each quarter, or at least twice a year, so that your team has good data to work off as they progress things forward. So have a play with these options. You can toggle between cash and accrual, and you can look at the forecast remaining and the variance percentage here. Just bear in mind that if you are selecting forecast here, run forecast remaining. If you're running snapshots here, run snapshots remaining. If you don't, you'll be eyeballing it, doing some rough math and saying, oh, that doesn't look right. And that's just because someone selected the wrong option. It doesn't sort of correspond with the options on the left-hand side. Click run when you're ready. Figured, because this report is a little bit different to the rest, figured we'll crunch those numbers and display all that information for you. Any variance here, if I collapse everything down just to give us a nice one-pager. So when I collapse it down and I go and share that report, when I want to annotate it and save that report, it'll remember the options that I set here. So any variance that's a negative variance will be red. Anything that's positive will be green. I got the month that I'm probably wanting to look at and talk to here based on the options that I selected, actual month versus forecast. And here's my year-to-date options and my forecast year to go with how much income or spend that I have left. So you can see how close you're getting to the end of a particular line item, which is pretty handy. The production report's the other one. Under reports, go to the production report. Off the back of the work that you do in your trackers, even if you're on sort of that end of year file, just maintaining your livestock rec, your milk rec, you can come in and run this production report. There's a few different options here, but you can see that the dollar per peak cows, the dollar per hectare gets shown here. Just an awesome report that I know a lot of people in the farming team value and ask for. So if they're looking for this, it's just under reports, under your financial reports, under production. That production report can be run. Under additional options, you can compare that to the prior years. I'll just do the year before, and you can see that stacking those two up side by side. If I had more years, you could run 3 to 5 years side by side. It'll fit quite comfortably. For sheep and beef, you might want to run stock units. You can customize those stock units in your trackers for each individual farm. That's a nice metric if you don't want to guesstimate or accurately put in your animal weights into your livestock trackers for sales, purchases, and all other movements. You can just use stock units. You can actually mix and match what trackers you run here. So if you have multiple sheep and beef trackers, you can select which ones you want to run to bring in the information here. So that's the production report. Just going to jump back and talk about this really quickly. For any of you on the call that is wanting to work through with myself or Andy, just let us know, email me or drop a line into the green bubble if you're keen to be a part of this program that I'm trialing out. So what we'll help users or champions do is come in and set up files in Figured, because there's a lot more to it than just what I showed you today, smashing through, building out a base plan, editing it. There's understanding all your options around setup for different types, for a single farm, a multi-farm, multi-entity. Being armed with that is super important when these clients come knocking, when you guys go out and talk to these clients, that you understand how Figured setup works. We'll go through this in this program. We'll also talk through best practice, and we'll have sessions broken out over the coming months. So I'll say 3 months roughly is where I'll take people that sign up for this program through using the app. So just once a week, we'll go through, do things on real files, your files, and then we'll catch up the following week and continue working on things from there. So we'll talk through best practice planning, best practice actuals. We'll go through reporting after we've built out these files, and then we'll go and use some more advanced tools around management valuations for livestock. I know that's super important for a lot of sheep and beef clients out there. Adds another aspect to your P&L. All the tips and tricks that you sort of heard me sort of talking about today, we'll go through those again, and any other tips that I have that I've picked up along the way, and share that with you across any of these stages. And we'll have a sort of a session at the end around preparing yourself for the Figured certification for those staff members that haven't been Figured certified. So if you're interested, drop us a line, flick me an email, drop us a line in the green bubble, or say something in the chat. Happy to call you guys up and talk about this program that we're going to trial out. Entry to it is just having a few new farms. So if you have new farms that are coming on to Figured, if you have Figured Lite files that you want to quickly upgrade and trial building out a plan for them, for your clients, to see if that helps conversations with them to secure lending, just plan better, take sort of ownership of the numbers that they have. I think this is just an awesome way that a few firms have worked with us in the past, getting existing champions or new champions to get some real files into this program, work through weekly over the next sort of 3 months with us is sort of the time frame I'll put over this program, and apply everything that we're learning to these real files. So sort of 2 birds with 1 stone, learn while adding value to an actual client file, and working with those clients. We'll be there to help you guys. So drop us a line if you're interested in that. Any questions? Any questions from anyone on the call? Andy, is there any question that you want to answer or call out on the chat? You can feel free to unmute yourself. Yeah, great question from somebody here about the light version. What kind of planning can you do on there? Figured Light's predominantly for actuals. In last week's session, I talked about what sort of reporting you could run over and above your livestock and milk trading statement. All your planning generally gets done in this full Figured version, but there is a version in between, Light plus scenarios. So you can do some high-level scenario planning, which is also part of that program I was talking about before. But to answer that person's question, with Figured Light, there is only management valuations that you can run in there if you wanted to do some sort of planning. But I'd upgrade the file to full Figured or to Light plus scenarios to plan either at a high level in those scenarios. The cost of the scenario tool is $19 a month. Awesome way to start off a high-level conversation with your clients to talk about what their goals are, build those into your scenarios. There's no limit to how many scenarios you can create. And then you can transition them onto full Figured and cash flow out a scenario. So I do that in that program as well. Well, the other thing is, if the most important, it's what's important to the engagement your client is having, whether it's with the bank or with you guys. If it's a scenario that they want to build, all well and good, get into there and build out a 3 to 5 year plan and pull some of those levers in different scenarios, whether that's buying a new farm, building a feed pad, etc. Or it might be about just building that 12-month cash flow that we did today. don't upgrade them to Lite Plus scenarios. Take them straight on to the full version. That'll allow your client, especially if they have zero data already, we can leverage that to build out their plan quite quickly. But if they don't, like I said, if you have a standardized chart of accounts, come into that program and work with Andy and I on how you can create a template, a curve template for a new client based off an existing one. We'll do some of that stuff with people that join that program to get straight to the value that matters, which is having a 12-month view, if that's more important than the scenario.
Hey, we've just had another question come through the chat, which was, how do you structure the layout of reporting, i.e. grouping of accounts? So that's just set within your chart of accounts. So you'll head under on the left-hand nav bar into accounting, chart of accounts, and then account configuration. So these are all the accounts that will import in from Xero and have some of our preset accounts in there as well. You can just select the checkbox on the left-hand side next to one of the accounts and scroll to the bottom and then change that category. So once you've set that category, that's going to have, that chart of account or that account will sit under that category in both the planning grid and on the reports.
Yeah, thanks for that, Andy. So I'm just in that account configuration area now. So long as you're selecting like accounts, you'll have an option at the bottom of the screen to select what category you want to put them in. And this is the payment periods that we were talking about before that dictate that split between cash and profit. And you can select what level of detail or if you want to hide an account. We don't let you categorize your accounts in, customize your account groupings in Figured for farming. Just because of the tools that we got in Figured Insights. So we got some sensitivity analysis, some benchmarking on its way. Firms are all investing in their client files around the metadata. When I talk about metadata, I mean peak cows, effective area. Getting all of that stuff right for every client file is going to be key, not only to provide value in their existing reports, like the production report that I showed you before that needs that data in there, but also for when we get into some of this Figured Insights, benchmarking, sensitivity analysis, firms will be able to go and pull all that information together and see what farms are most affected if the price drops by a certain amount. Also, that benchmarking piece will come later. But it does require teams to have champions that understand how Figured needs to be set up, that helps their clients and their team own that data and maintain it. Again, going back to that program, we'll train people that join on how to look after their files, where to find information, how to update it, so that not only can you get more value out of the individual subscriptions that we're in, but also for those big data plays that are on the horizon. I'm going to stop the recording now, but I will hang around if there's more questions to be asked. Please ask. There's no question too small or too big, and we'll try to answer those. So I'm going to stop the recording now.